Today we are going to discuss the topic of aligning business strategy with cyber risk management. We know that recent business environments have made it very, very clear that cybersecurity is not just, or shouldn't be, just IT problem, is a business problem, is a business risk. And so now we have this challenge to present that to our board and how we speak with them, what kind of language we need to use, and we will explore this today with our guests. So today I will give you just a minute just to do an introduction. We have Priyanka, Anne, and Robin, expert in cyber risk management, and we will go through this topic and we will delve into that. So just a minute of quick introduction for each of you.
Sure. Hi, can everyone hear me? All right, I can hear myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Priyanka Chatterjee. I'm the CEO of London School of Cybersecurity, and I've been in the cyber industry for, now 22 plus years. Yeah, so I've I've done a job, done a bit of consulting, and I've kind of taken my career towards sharing what I've learned and sharing my insights with young and senior experienced people. Likewise, I'm a bit of a cyber nomad. That's kind of the recent name I've given myself because I've worked globally. I was born in India, lived in multiple countries. And yeah, that's why some of the words you might hear sounds American, some British, some Indian. So you can figure it out. Yeah, that's me. And thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion. And to you.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Anne McManus. I'm Senior Counsel for Data Protection, Cybersecurity, and Privacy at FIS. So we're a fintech, Fortune 500 company, Jacksonville-based in Florida, but we've got operations in about 65 different countries globally. So lots of data to protect and lots of incidents to look out for. Prior to working at FIS, I was at Lloyd's of London, so the insurance markets. I was market information security, data protection, and data governance lead for the Future at Lloyd's project. So that was a huge digital transformation project of the Lloyd's insurance market. Insurance is kind of like the sleepy side of financial services. It feels like when you've jumped from fintech, I was at MasterCard before I went to Lloyd's. Then going back to insurance, there was such a switch in the state of how data was being managed and how cybersecurity was being led. So it's been interesting to do that pivot from insurance to fintech. So yeah, lots to talk about. Look forward to sharing some of the experience with you. I'll pass over to Robin.
Thanks, Anne. Robin Oldham from Cydeer. Prior to founding Cydeer about 6 years ago, I used to run one of the world's top 10 information security consultancies. We help people to understand their risk and respond to some pretty big incidents. So I've had the fortune or misfortune of working with the likes of TalkTalk, Swift in the Bangladesh bank heist, and I'm also a non-exec director with the British Library, helping them recover from their cyber incident.
Okay, no, thank you very much. And so let's start with the first question. The first question is for you, Priyanka. So we know that many security teams are built around compliance, but we know that the true alignment goes deeper than that. So in your experience, what is the single most effective way to translate technical cyber risk jargon findings into terms that a non-technical CEO or a non-technical board member can use for their informed decision, for their strategic decision making?
You're going to start with a big question there. But to that, I think if I've got like a second, the only one word is storytelling. We all need to get better at storytelling, right? Everyone understands we are not from their world, right? We don't need them to be experts. So there's a lot of acknowledgement. And I always like to draw some parallels here, right? So for example, how many of you here watch Instagram Reels or TikToks? Can you just raise hands? Okay, so I'll raise hand. I do have a 15 minutes daily Instagram slot. Okay, that's just my me time. My kids know that as well. They're like, oh, mom, that's mom's me time. So we all know that but there's a lot that goes on, right? But now, how many of you know about the concept of A-roll, B-roll, camera angles? Anyone? Okay, there you go. We've got one hand. When it comes to watching it, we had so many more. When it comes to knowing the background behind what goes around creating those reels, one hand, two hands maybe, yeah? So that, when we apply that analogy back to what we expect from the business, that's kind of exactly what's happening. We are hiring the salespeople or the product teams or the marketing teams. They should know how to get the job done. We are not hiring them to do cybersecurity work because kind of I like my job. I want to get paid. So I'm being selfish, right? So that's kind of where I think we need to get better at storytelling. Because one, when they understand how it impacts them and what it means for them, and Federico, you also talked about the fact that it's not IT's job, but a lot of it goes down to what is the perception of the business leaders, right? For all individuals, it's a very simple thing. What needs to be done? How does it impact me? And why do I need to do something? It has to be part of my life. Otherwise, who cares? There's a million things in the world, right? So that's kind of where I would say we need to focus on building that storytelling. Yes, we will have a ransomware attack. Will we lose money, right? We have seen in the UK, like recently, a lot of organizations have been attacked, right? We have got manufacturing, we have got our favorite hypermarkets being kind of impacted. For me personally, I couldn't shop. For them, they lost millions of pounds. So as a cyber person, I should be able to go and tell the person, my head of, or the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, saying, you know what, I want to buy these ransomware agents or some kind of tool which will detect a ransomware attack. Why? Because you know what, when the business goes down for a day, you're going to lose 10 million pounds. Give me 500K and I'll reduce that from 10 million pounds to say, I don't know, £1 million, because I now know that there's a problem and I can react faster, right? So that's a much faster. They would say, okay, 10 million, 500K, it makes more sense. But if I give them like a 10-pager thing saying, oh, I want this ransomware detection tool and this will do that and this will do that and we have got AI, fantastic stuff, they'll be like, okay, ask the IT guy, right? And that's the end of the conversation. And so if we get better at storytelling, I think our life becomes much easier. And I've done this in practice. That's how I think I have changed my whole career and how much I can earn, honestly. Now I can put a number and it works. But that's because I've put in all those time to learn what exactly marketing does. What does A role, B role, what does sales does, what does CRM mean, what does ERP do? You have to do a little bit of prep work. And to be honest, I think it's a good 10 to 12 months of conscious effort on all of our side to just know enough about each department so that you can use their terms, you can throw in the words so they feel like, I know what they're talking about, right? Because it's a lot about how do you tell the message. So I'm just going to pause here.
No. Very, very interesting. Over to you, Anne. Would you like to add anything to?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea Priyanka shared about storytelling. So I think that's really good for helping the business understand the why. I would say I quite like to frame cyber risks in terms of business outcomes. So you alluded to revenue, but also perhaps regulatory exposure, reputational risk. Look at your company's values and think about how you can pin what you're trying to do from a cyber lens into what your company goals are or what your company values are, and try and translate the jargon into so that it maps to those company values that everyone is striving to work towards. So instead of talking about we're trying to resolve a critical vulnerability in an API, you could say something like, this flaw could allow attackers to access customer data. That would lead to regulatory fines and loss of trust. The potential impact of that would be that we're exposed to £10 million worth of fines. We have 3 to 4 months of building trust back up or our service will be offline for X amount of time. I find that's a really good way to help the business understand why addressing cyber concerns is part of their job as well as yours. I'll pass over to Robin.
Yeah, Robin, to you.
I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think for larger organizations, there's a real emphasis on, like you say, compliance. But for the vast majority of organizations, particularly smaller firms, security is a technology problem. It sits in the tech space, and you're familiar with talking in technology terms to a technology leader. And so when you start to try and communicate to non-technology people, that's where some of these breakdowns occur. So I think for a lot of non-regulated firms, it's a tech rather than a compliance problem. But I also think the translation, you need to understand and put yourself, it's cliche, but put yourselves in their shoes. And I've kind of seen that both as a practitioner and a consultant working into people, and on the other side as a business owner and then as a non-exec, how people bring the problems to us. So quick show of hands. Who would consider themselves a cyber person, a cybersecurity practitioner? And who isn't? Who's here because they're interested in the other side of the equation? Small number there. Oh, actually, more people probably on the other side of that. I've kind of mentally got an idea of where you all were. So if we use M&S as an example, lots of posts on social media recently, and I've noticed quite a big divide between the two about them. So who thinks that the recent M&S results were terrible and reinforced that they weren't taking cybersecurity seriously? And who thinks that they were good news? One or two people. So there was lots made about the fact that it cost them, it was potentially going to cost them up to 300 million. They've actually got a cyber insurance claim that's going to cost, going to cover potentially 100 million of those costs. 50 million of that 300 million was actually a levy coming in to do with recycling packaging. Nothing to do with cybersecurity. It was already priced into what was going on. Those results also told us that revenues were up 12%, that they were still one of the UK's top 5 retailers by reputation, and that the share price has gone up over 280% in the last 3 years. So if you're a cyber person coming saying, hey, this event proves doom and gloom and that we need to do more, and you're trying to communicate that message to a CEO who's got this broader picture where revenues are up, we've managed to weather a storm, we've got good customer retention, we've got good reputation, our share price is going gangbusters. It's actually higher than it was at the start of the year in spite of the incident mid-year. That message that you're trying to land isn't going to be received well because it doesn't match with the perception they have across the bigger picture. So I think understanding that wider context is quite important as well when it comes to that. It doesn't invalidate your point of view, but understanding others' perspectives as well, I think, is really important.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, Robin. Yes. One point, so we often talk about the CISO and the CEO, but as Priyanka was saying earlier, okay, you need to spend some time to learn the language used by other internal stakeholders to communicate with them. But if we think of other internal stakeholders like head of sales rather than head of product, what role they play in managing cyber risk? So and how can we empower them to own the risk in their domain? So over to you, Anne. So from your experience?
Yeah, we've been quite successful with this at FIS. So we're as a fintech, our clients are regulated banks and major regulated clients across the financial services industry, and they're really looking to check that we've everything they buy from us is absolutely above board from a cybersecurity perspective. So that's really got our sales guys motivated to learn as much cybersecurity as possible. As a lawyer, especially a data protection cybersecurity lawyer, normally we're kept sort of, as far away from clients and doing any sales stuff as possible. We're kind of like, the last resort. But the sales guys have started bringing me and my team into their pitches because it's seen as such a critical part of them selling their products. So not only are they getting engaged and wanting to learn so that they can explain what we're doing, and also the nice sort of internal compliance side of that is that they've learned enough about what they're trying to sell that now they're enthusiastic and they can spot the risks internally. So we've had, it's been a great transition from, say, 10 years ago when sales guys, this was something that they didn't want to have to talk about, and that's for IT to manage if something goes wrong, to this being something that they're leading with in their propositions. So I think things like DORA and these
Can I ask,
requirements are
do you
helping.
think that came from inside the company or from the clients asking for someone like you to be in those meetings?
I think it's a bit of both. I'd like to say we do a lot of training and awareness, and not just the mandatory training that everyone rolls their eyes and said, "Oh, do I need to give up another hour?" But actually going and meeting the teams and understanding what they're doing, and explaining why cybersecurity or data protection fits into their role. And I think with GDPR, there is a lot of attention to data and how we protect that data. And how we protect that data is where cyber comes in. So I think people have got a lot more interested, not just because of that regulatory push, but it's just been, it's in the news. You see the cyber and data breaches. You want to make sure we're not that next bad news story. So I think there's been the external motivation and the internal motivation, which has worked quite well so far.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for that. And anything to add to this, Priyanka?
Yes, I always have. I love GRC. So I think for me, I think there's three words that comes to my mind, right? So one is empower. How do we really, like Anne said, make them aware so they feel empowered to go and talk? Like if they are selling to the client, if they say, "Oh, I'm this compliant and I'm that compliant," they should be aware of that. The salespeople, being them, and then they should be able to have a decent enough conversation. So one is, how do we empower them? Second is, how do we support them, right? Because they may or may not be able to have all the conversations. So that's kind of where Anne is like, now she's being asked to join those meetings. So that's supporting them, right? When they're like, I'm somewhat aware, but not fully aware. So how do you support them to reach there? And the third piece is, we got to celebrate. Now, you started by saying, started the question by saying, oh, we've got the sales team and the product teams and stuff like that. Now, the concept of cybersecurity is going to be very different for each of them. For sales, it might be, oh, I can sell better because we have all this compliance. For product team, it might be more inwards looking. If you're a product company saying, oh, I can fix a bug or give you a security patch much faster. So my client says, oh, I found a vulnerability, which is very normal in a product scenario. They would say, okay, I'm going to give you a fix in 4 to 6 weeks, right? Or much less if it's like a really zero-day type fix. So when we make these things part of their life, part of their process, we kind of bring in that sense of ownership. And once you own it, you don't necessarily need to do much after that, because then they're going to come to you, of course, but then you need to be ready to kind of receive the floodgate as well, because you have now gone in and opened the floodgate on the business. But that's a good problem to have, I would say. We have created the opportunities where they're asking too many questions. You may not have all answers because you are still trying to understand what they mean. But I think if we do a good balance of this empowerment, support, and celebration for those who are doing well, because I've sat through enough risk management committee meetings and board meetings where we always start by saying we are X compliant, but we need to do better. So we always start with the problem statement that we still have this much more work to do. But we should start with, oh, we have already come this way much. And well done, Mr. Sales, for engaging Anne and talking about all this compliance to the clients. But product guys, you need to hurry up, right? So that way we bring in the sense of ownership, the sense of celebration. The sales teams are like, yep, I love Anne because she's celebrating and she's saying we are doing a good job. Yeah, we all like when we get appreciated. I would love you if you tell me like, oh, Priyanka, you're the biggest expert in the world. I'll remember your name. So think what would motivate them, what would attract them. Think human, I would say. Forget about the subject matter for a bit. First connect to the human, the rest will be history very, very quickly. Robin.
So when it comes back to the kind of shared ownership or where the ownership really lies, I think it's where the budget and the authority to do something about it sits. And actually, probably lots of these people are the risk owners, they just don't realize it. And if you're in a security team, you're maybe patching over that and getting frustrated by taking on a load of responsibility and a load of grief for something that you actually isn't within your control or ability to do anything with. So if you haven't got the budget to fix the problem and you're not authorized to make changes to things to improve it, then you aren't the owner of that risk or whatever it might be, that opportunity, that control. So the ownership question, I think, is probably quite easy to resolve if you start to apply that lens and use that kind of argument. And maybe your business does want the security team to own risk rather than it being out in the sales team or in the product team. If that's the case, then you need to have some budget and some authority to make changes. So now the product team is going to develop in this way, and they're going to go through these gates. I don't think your business will want to do that. I think they'll want the product team to own that process. But if that's the case, they need to take ownership for delivering a quality and a secure product. So yeah, shared ownership, I think, look for where the budget is, look for where the authority is.
Following that, there is always, been the dichotomy between, business agility and security, and thinking that security is slowing business down, is just a checklist or something that they as you were saying, let's say that the security team needs to own the risk, and then the product team will need to go through security. If we enforce that, that can slow things down. So how would you see that working? How would you see security actually being adapting to the speed the business will need to maintain?
I think that's where risk appetite has a really important part to play. So we're all very quick to say there's no such thing as being 100% secure. There is an acknowledgement that trying to prevent everything bad from happening is impossible. And that's grown up, that's mature. You can't do that. Risk appetite gives you a finish line of what the business deems is a sensible place to get to. One of the kind of analogies that I like to think of, because kind of fairly easy for people to relate to, is thinking about if you're in a bar and order a drink. Pub buys in 72 pints in a keg, hook it up. They do not get 72 pints out of every single keg, right? How many times have you seen someone pouring a beer, there's loads ahead, it all spills over. They probably pour 2 or 3 pints in order to get your one drink that you kind of walk off with. There is an appetite within the business for, and it's priced in as there being some kind of wastage in hospitality when it comes to those things. Risk appetite is the thing that allows you to say where your finish line is. So we accept that we're not going to be 100% secure and that bad things will happen, but this is the level that we want to get to and that we would be accepting of. Maybe that for a really large organization might still be millions of pounds worth of security incident investigation, response, remediation costs every year because you're a 20 billion pound company. That might be acceptable to you. Maybe you're a 5 million turnover SME, in which case your risk appetite is going to be much smaller, and you're going to want to keep a lid on things and keep them closer. But that kind of gives you, as a security practitioner or as a on the other side of the equation from a business perspective, a line to look at and go, are we above or below that? How are we getting on? And that's much easier to do if you're quantifying it and using pounds and pence or dollars and cents and attaching those kind of things to it, which is pretty easy and straightforward to go through. And you probably have a load more data than you realize to do it. I'm happy to have more conversation about that, but that's probably not the nature of this question. So yeah, risk appetite, I think, is that lever that lets you maintain that agility and then say, okay, we're now above that level. We need to do a bit more work. Or, what, actually, as a business, we're happy to take, sitting down and getting them to put some numbers on it. Maybe they're happy to take £10 million worth of risk. And we don't need to worry about it and can let them get on with what they're doing. And, we accept that there will be consequences, that there will be wastage, that we're not going to get a full pint every time we try to pour one. So I think that's where risk appetite really helps with that agility versus posture and kind of navigating those conversations.
Okay. Yeah. It makes sense. Yes, I can see that. And so let's say that if the business identify a new opportunity, let's say that entering in a new market or launching a new product, something very, very big. So how do you ensure that a cyber conversation about cyber risk happen early in the process and doesn't get at the end and just at that point it would be like a blocker or a slowing down the process? So do you have a practical example of how security is going to be meant to be involved at the beginning of a stage?
Yeah, what I've done every business I've worked for is try and map where change is happening. So which teams are involved in getting a product off the ground or changing a process? So is it project management team? Might it be triggered by you taking on new suppliers? Your product development teams. And make sure that they're really bought into data protection and cybersecurity so they understand that they've got to get that done right from the start. And every team all the teams that are involved in that change or product development, make sure that each of those understands the value of security and why it needs to be done, not just we need to comply with law, but why it's really critical that we start building our products with that embedded at the start, because it's going to be really difficult for them to get to their product launch and then say, hang on a second, we've missed out on all these critical elements and now we've got to go back, we've promised our clients or we're presenting this at a big conference and now cyber and data protection have come along and told us we can't do this. So making sure that those teams know how critical it is to get security, data protection embedded from the beginning is really important. And I found once they understand that, they will act as gatekeepers. So whenever they see a change coming along and they say, have you spoken to data protection? Have you spoken to cybersecurity? Have you spoken to, and make them understand how critical it is that they speak to you early on. And if those teams, once they start acting as your champion, they won't let the product get to a stage where they've missed out on that opportunity to make security embedded, embryonic in that product launch. So I found making friends with anyone involved in that launch cycle is critical, and then creating a checklist along with any of the other teams that are critical for managing those risks. I know people don't like checklists, but it's good for having a checklist with SLAs is another important thing. So I think if people see that they've got a huge list of all these compliance things that are getting in the way of them launching their product and they don't have a timeline, they'll say, okay, I'm going to try and bypass that somehow. So making sure that you've got clear SLAs for how long it will take you to do all the things that you need to do to make that process cyber compliant is really important.
Okay. No, thank you for that. From yourself, Priyanka, do you have any further point on this?
Just I think 2 cents from me is Anne used 2 interesting words which sound very similar, no and then no. Yeah, so the one is N-O, no, and then another one is K-N-O-W. English is an interesting language that way. So for us to kind of flip the view where they don't see us as someone who always says no to someone who knows, we have to know that there's something new happening, right? So it takes work, it takes friendships to build, like I said. And sometimes it's just very simple. If you are a senior member of the cyber team or senior leader here, and if you're not spending at least an hour each week just talking to business and just asking a very simple question, what's new, what's going on? You don't need to kind of write a run book for that. It's just a friendly thing, right? So what are you doing new? And once you know, in your head, we are always solutioning. So that's cyber folks. We are always solutioning. We hear, oh, they're going to start a new office. I need to get a firewall in. I need to make sure it's covered in the SIM, and I need to make sure my team is, we have done da-da-da-da-da, right? Slow down. Take a step back. There's some minimum stuff that needs to happen on day 0 or day 1. And then there's stuff that will need to evolve. You know, as experts in your fields, something will happen sooner and something will take longer. So do your business a favor that way, saying, okay, this is the minimum stuff, let's do this, and then let's talk about the rest of the stuff as we bring this thing, it's a new product launch or whatever, or it's a new office or whatever. So I would say just go from that no to no, I don't know. I always say no to know about what's happening. Keep your ears open and the eyes open.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Robin, do you want to add?
Yeah, I suppose quickly, there's a couple of different levels of assessment and kind of what we're talking about here as well, right? So you've got big strategic level, enterprise kind of level cyber risk. That's going to be reasonably static. And if you're evolving your strategy and looking to move into a new region or bring a new product to market, thinking through those kind of existing scenarios and how those might change gives you that big picture answer straight off the bat without needing to worry too much about it. And then you've got the change point and engaging with those teams as it's coming along to make sure that what they're designing and developing, be it people, process, technology, is secure as well. And you can do the big picture one without necessarily needing to know all the details of what's happening. We think we're going to go and double our customer base by expanding into this new country, and that's going to take us 5 years to do that. Well, you could quite easily, if you had a data protection risk, for example, look at our current risk level is 5 million because that's based on having 1 million customers, and we reckon it's roughly about £5 per customer. Okay, we're going to double that over the next 5 years because we're going to double our customer base. You can kind of start to pull some of those levers and model some of those things up front. And you don't need to have got to any of the kind of solution at that point. You can just provide that as an input and say, well, if that's what's going to happen, we're going to be higher than our risk appetite again, or maybe how is that going to change? And you can have the kind of big picture conversation and then loop back round to, okay, right, now tactically, kind of operationally, as we build this thing out, what does that look like and what's that level of risk and what are those individual kind of scenarios look like? Where might there be APIs that we need to secure, or like you say, firewalls and new offices that we need to put in place and that kind of stuff. So kind of thinking through two different lenses at two different stages of the kind of evolution there, I think is a really important part.
From your point of view, if, as we said, the business is going to do something big, like grow in a new market, or what is the security control that you think is non-negotiable, that needs to be there, something that the business will need to take into consideration? What would you suggest?
I'm not going to fall for that trap and tell you there's a silver bullet. No, I think what I was just saying, that the control, if you like, is the risk assessment. Use that to prioritize your investment and what you need to look at. If you're going to do one thing, do that. Don't look at specific individual technology controls, because those will vary for every single person's business that's out here, right? For some it might be MFA, for some it might be, well, actually it makes more sense to have insurance. For others, it might be some kind of detection and response type capability. There are obviously kind of core basic hygiene things, antivirus or anti-malware, where it would kind of make sense to have those things in. But I think more important to take the step back and do the assessment and prioritize what you're going to do.
And I think that, it's a good point, just to work on the risk assessment, that it can be different, as you said. Priyanka, how would you manage this point? So, what is?
I kind of agree with what Robin just said, right? Risk assessment. For me, it's all about, it's almost a parallel word, I would say, threat modeling. It kind of goes hand in hand with risk assessment. So I think if we are heading into a new market, right, the first thing is the business knows we are taking on a risk in all fronts, right? The first is, will we have enough revenue? We are going in with a plan, will it work? So as someone who has got 2 businesses and offices in 6 countries, when I think about opening an operation in a new country, I always think, okay, who in the current team can do this? Or Can I ship someone? Do I need to hire, right? It starts from that first fundamental question, who is going to run that operation? If I'm thinking about, I don't know, I go and open an office in Barbados, is there enough market? Can I have enough money, right? Can I pay those? So those are questions and similar, and I will be, as the business leader, I will be asking exact same question when it comes to cyber risk, it comes to any other type of risk, right? So I think that's where, whether the business calls it threat modeling or risk assessment or not, in their mind, they are doing that, right? Whether it's documented, not documented. We are always asking those questions. So that's kind of, I think, when we do a mix of threat modeling, if you have a structured one, yes, go ahead and do it. If not, at least do a storyboarding with your business saying, okay, what's your plan? What kind of revenue are we talking about? Is it going to be a big operation, small operation? Because it'll depend. If they're just hiring like 2 salespeople in Barbados, very different scenario than, oh, I'm going to open all of my, IT support office there. 2 very different conversations, right? So it's to know about that. What are they going to do? Listen first and then solution later. Do your threat modeling. You don't have to document in the first meeting. You can come back and do it at your desk and then go and say, okay, you know what, this makes sense.
Yes, no. Obviously, it depends, yes, as you said, by what the company would need to do and what is the need and the goal of the company. From your side, Anne?
I would say on the basis that compromised credentials remain the #1 reason for data breaches, I would go for identity and access management. Understanding what data you've got, who should have access to, and managing around that is critical. So I think that's quite an easy one. Regardless of how much budget you've got, you should be able to do that. So I think that's a simple, not a one-size-fits-all, because obviously you want to make sure you've got all the controls, you've done your risk assessment, and you understand what risks you're managing. But I think this is one that's quite easy. Well, it's something that's always there.
Yeah. Okay, now we just have 1 minute left. I can see the timer. So just for your final thought on this. So starting with you, Robin, you have like 20 seconds for your final.
Sure, I'll talk really quickly. Risk is the way to translate stuff between cyber and the business. I think it's a really easy way. Quantifying it makes it much easier to understand, and you need way less data than you think to get started. So much so, so we're here exhibiting Cydia. You can see a nice pink glow in the distance. We will do a quantified risk assessment for you in 20 minutes on your organization if you're here today or tomorrow. Come and see us. We'd love to have a chat.
I'd say early engagement and shared accountability are key. They're the difference between resilience and disruption. So make sure you're partnering with all the teams that you need to and that they understand what risks they're looking for so they can help mitigate them.
Yeah, my comment would be that let's keep our jobs. We don't need to make all the business users cyber experts. That's why we are employed. But we need to work enough so that we bring the sense of ownership to them, so that we empower, support, and celebrate. They should be coming to us and having that conversation, because we are specialists in our field. So let's build that relationship and make sure that they are coming to us and they have a sense of ownership.
Okay, no, thank you very much. So I'd like to thank our panelists for their insights. So I don't know if we have time for questions, probably. I don't know. If there is any question, the panelists will be very happy to answer.
Maybe one question?
You've got to be willing to stand up at that microphone, though.
Yes. Yeah, you will need to be the star and just stand by the microphone. Oh.
Go on, ask us a really difficult one. It goes in the fridge.
He's going to beg for a question. Oh, please. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
What's been your most challenging moment in your cybersecurity career so far?
Well,
Wants to take those first?
no, I could not hear that.
I think it was, what's been your most challenging moment in your cybersecurity career ominously so far, this gentleman is intending to make our lives more difficult by the end of the day, I think.
Ooh. Okay, so I've dabbled onto most of the domains in cybersecurity. The technical pieces, I think, yeah, it needs expertise, but then because you're talking to systems, it kind of, you can manage that to a lot. I would say I can control that much better than when working with people. If I have to share my most frustrating moment, I would say, not most challenging, when I was handed a list of about 3,000 vendors and said, go review them without telling me who are the point of contacts, how do I do this, and will the vendors respond? And I was quite young at that time. I didn't have any gray hair, so it was like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this list, right? So I had to re-engineer, like, okay, who would know? Who is using that vendor? So that was a very frustrating moment for me, but then I think the big learning from that moment is that I learned that if you don't know who the vendors are, go ask the finance team who is paying the invoices.
Yeah, first was the worst, and it was, typical. Everyone's just about to sign off for Christmas. No one is in the office, and then what do we see? This was at Lloyd's of London. It was a very big one. So a gentleman or a hacker called the Dark Overlord starts tweeting to say he's managed to find some very sensitive files about the insurance of the Twin Towers, and he's going to start hacking them. So something that's very emotionally, something that's going to stir a lot of emotions. People don't want to see the insurance, and if that comes out, it's not going to look very nice for all the companies involved. So this gentleman had started to encrypt around the folders, and it was very public. There was news, it made it to the front page of the FT, and I just think because it was one of my first ever big breaches, obviously just before Christmas, no one's there, and I think it was a real test in who you can bring in on those days where no one's around, but just the communication, messaging, getting to the right people, and working very closely with our external comms team was vital to getting that one from what could have been a very bad FT frontline to something that wasn't quite so bad. And thankfully, he didn't manage to get all the way to the files. So yeah, an exciting one.
Also an emotional event. And it was, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say well-meaning vendors, running very close to an ambulance and saying that their thing would have solved the problem. To various members of the board, and then having 4 hours to explain why no, enabling database encryption was not going to prevent all this data from walking out the front door or something like that. Just a barrage of really poor play from other companies that were trying to muscle in on and capitalize on someone else's loss. That's always really difficult because everyone's trying their hardest. On a purely practical basis, when I was working with Swift in the wake of the Bangladesh bank heist and trying to put in place the customer security program, so it wasn't Swift themselves that were compromised; it was one of the banks. Kind of similar to yours, Priyanka. We've got 13,000 customers, and we don't know who the security contacts are. I bet no one's incident response plan has establish a call center and start phoning all your 13,000 customers to try and ask who the CISO is. And you learn pretty quickly that trying to go in via the front door and ask someone on reception that information doesn't get you very far either. So yeah, that was weeks and weeks and weeks of just data gathering to try and be able to communicate with the right people, reassure them, establish the right kind of program. So that was practically exhausting. The other one was more emotionally exhausting. So.
Thank you very much. That's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.